Hello, friends, for the World's Wealth Project, 12th edition. Today we're going to carry on with science and technology, according to the most recent investigations and research on this matter. It's very important for us to know, as citizens, what is it that transhumanism, which is the topic we're going to talk about today, why it's so important for us citizens to know about this. An article by Alexander Thomas, PhD candidate from the University of East London, that was published on July 31st, 2017. From the Conversation, Academic Rigor article. Superintelligence and eternal life. Everyone who follows this blindly are looking for the future for the elite. The rapid development of NBIC technologies, that is nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive sciences, are giving rise to the possibilities that have long been the domain of science fiction. Disease, aging, and even death are all human realities that these technologies seek to end. They may enable us to enjoy greater morphological freedom. We can take on new forms through prosthetics or genetic engineering, or advance cognitive capacities. We can use brain-computer interfaces to link us to advanced artificial intelligence or AI. Nanobots could roam our bloodstream to monitor our health and enhance our emotional propensities for joy, love, or other emotions. Advances in one area often raise new possibilities in others, and this convergence may bring about radical changes to our world in the near future. Transhumanism is the idea that humans should transcend their current natural state limitations through the use of technology, and that we should embrace self-directed human evolution. If the history of technological progress can be seen as humankind's attempt to tame nature to better serve its needs, transhumanism is the logical continuation. The revision of humankind's nature to better serve its fantasies, we might say. As David Pierce, a leading proponent of transhumanism and co-founder of Humanity Plus, says, and I quote, "If we want to live in paradise, we will have to engineer it ourselves. If we want eternal life, then we will need to rewrite our bug-readed genetic code and become godlike. Only high-tech solutions can ever eradicate suffering from the world. Compassion alone is not enough." Unquote. But there is a darker side to the naive faith that Pierce and other people have in transhumanism, one that is decidedly dystopian. There isn't likely to be a clear moment where we emerge as transhuman. Rather, technologies will become more intrusive and integrate seamlessly with the human body. Technology has long been thought of as an extension of the self. Many aspects of our social world, not least our financial systems, are already largely machine-based. There is much to learn from these evolving human-machine systems. Yet, the often utopian language and expectations that surround and shape our understanding of these developments have been under-interrogated. The profound changes that lie ahead are often talked about in abstract ways because evolutionary advancements are deemed so radical that they ignore the reality of current social conditions. Transhumanism becomes, indeed, a kind of techno-anthropocentrism. Transhumanists often underestimate the complexity of our social issues with technology. They see it as controllable, malleable, a controllable, malleable tool that, with the correct logical and scientific rigor, can be turned into any end. In fact, just as technological developments are depending on and reflective of the environment in which they arise, they in turn feed back into the culture and create new dynamics, often imperceptibly. Situating transhumanism, then, within the broader social and cultural, political and cultural context in which this emerges, is vital to understand how ethical transhumanism is. But what about the competitive environments in which this develops? Natasha Bitamor and Max, in their edited volume, The Transhumanist Reader, claim the need in transhumanism for inclusivity, for plurality, for a continuous questioning of our knowledge. Yet, these three principles are incompatible with the transformative technologies within the prevailing systems from which they are currently emerging, that is, advanced capitalism. One problem is that a highly competitive social environment doesn't lend itself to diverse ways of being. Instead, it's exclusively efficient behavior. Take students, for example. If some have access to pills that allow them to achieve better results, can other students afford not to follow? These are, this is already a quandary. Increasing number of students pop performance enhancing pills, and if pills become more often, and if the enhancements involve genetic engineering or intrusive nanotechnology that offer even stronger competitive advantages, what then? Rejecting an advanced technological orthodoxy could potentially render someone socially and economically moribund, perhaps evolutionary so, while everyone with access is effectively forced to participate and to keep up. Going beyond their everyday limits is suggestive of some kind of liberation. However, here is an imprisoning compulsion to act a certain way. We literally have to transcend in order to conform and to survive. The more extreme the transcendence, the more profound the decision to conform and the imperative to do so. The systematic forces scheduling the individual into being upgraded to remain competitive also play out on a geopolitical arena. One area where technology R&D as the greatest transhumanist potential is defense, for example. DARPA, that is the United States Defense Department, responsible for developing military technologies, which is attempting to create metabolically dominant soldiers, is a clear example of vested interest of a particular social system that can determine the development of powerful transformative technologies that have disruptive rather than utopian applications in this matter. The rush to develop superintelligence, AI, by globally competitive and mutually distrustful nations or states can also become an arms race. In Radical Evolution, novelist Werner Winch describes the scenario in which a superhuman intelligence is the ultimate weapon. Ideally, mankind will proceed with the utmost care in developing such a powerful and transformative innovation. There is quite rarely trepidation around this creation of superintelligence and the emergence of the singularity. Singularity being the idea that once AI reaches a certain level, it will rapidly redesign itself, leading to an explosion of intelligence that will quickly surpass that of humans, something that will happen by the year 2029, according to futurist Ray Kurzweil. If the world takes the shape of the most powerful AI programmed or reprogram itself to desire, it even opens the possibility of evolution taking a turn for the entirely venal. Like, could an AI destroy humankind for a desire to produce the most paper clips, for example? Which sounds ridiculous. It is also difficult to conceive of any aspects of humanity that could not be improved by being made more efficient at satisfying the demands of a competitive system. It is the system, then, that will determine humanity's evolution without taking anything of what humans are or what they should be. One of the ways in which advanced capitalism is extremely dynamic is in its ideology for metaphysical neutrality. As philosopher Michael Sanders said, markets don't wag fingers. In advanced capitalism, maximizing one's expending power maximizes one's ability to flourish. Hence, shopping could be said to be a primarily moral of the individual. Philosopher Bob Dewey rightly suggests that it is this venal logic of the markets that will dominate. And I quote, if biotech has rendered human nature entirely revisable, then it has no grain to direct or to constrain our designs on it. And so, whose designs will our successor post-human artifacts likely bear? I have little doubt that in our vastly consumerist media-saturated capitalistic communities, market forces will have their ways. So, the commercial imperative will be the true architect of the future human. And I quote, whether the evolutionary processes that determine by a superintelligent AI or advanced capitalism, we might be compelled to inform to a perpetual transcendence that only makes us more efficient at activities demanded by the most powerful system. The end is predictable and entirely non-human, so very efficient. Technologically, such a technological entity, though very efficient, will derive from humanity that doesn't necessarily serve a purpose that a modern day human will value in any way. The ability to serve the system effectively will be the driving force. This is also true in natural evolution. Technologies are not a simple tool that allows us to engineer ourselves out of this conundrum, but transhumanism could amplify the speed at least desirable aspects of this process. What about information authoritarianism? Well, for bioethicist Iulian Savulescu, the main reason humans must be enhanced is for our species to survive. According to him, we face a Bermuda Triangle: radical technological power, liberal democracy, and our moral nature. As a transhumanist, Savulescu extols technological progress, also deeming it inevitable and unstoppable. It is liberal democracy, and particularly our moral nature, that should alter, according to him. The failings of humankind dealing with global problems are increasingly big, but Savulescu neglects to situate our moral failings within the wider economical and political contexts, instead believing that solutions lie within our biological makeup. Yet, how Savulescu's morales enhancing technologies be disseminated, prescribed, and potentially enforced to address the moral failings they seek to cure? This will likely reside in the power structures that will bear much of the responsibility for these failings in the first place. He's also quickly to revealing how relative and contestable the concept of morality is. And I quote here, we will need to relax our commitment to maximum protection of privacy. We are seeing an increasing surveillance of individuals, and that will be necessary if we are to avert the threats that those with antisocial personality disorder, fanaticism, represent through their access to radically enhancing technologies, unquote. Such surveillance, as the corporations have governments to access and make a huge, extremely valuable information from our privacy. So, who owns the future? In Who Owns the Future, internet pioneer Lanier explains, private lives and inner beings dossiers of ordinary people collected over digital networks is going to become a new private form of elite money. It is a new kind of security in which the rich trade in and the value is naturally driven. It becomes as a levy inaccessible to ordinary people to make profit. Crucially, this levy is also invisible to most people. And its impacts extend beyond this queuing economic system towards the elites to significantly altering the very conception of liberty, because the authority of power is both radical, more effective, and dispersed. Foucault's notion that we live in a panoptic society, one in which the sense of being perpetually watched instills discipline, is now stretched to the point where today's insist machinery have been called a superpanopticon. The knowledge and information that transhumanist technologies will tend to create strengthen existing powers structures that cement the inherent logic of the system in which the knowledge arises. This is in part evident in the tendency of algorithms toward tracing gender bias, which reflects our already existing social failings. Information technology tends to interpret the world in defined ways. It privileges information that is easily measurable, such as GDP, at the expense of unquantifiable information such as human happiness or well-being, as invasive technologies perpetuate even more broader data about us. This data may in very real sense come to define the world, and intangible information may not maintain its rightful place in human affairs. Will this create systematic dehumanization? Existing inequities, which surely be magnified interaction of psychopharmaceuticals, highly effective genetics modifications, superintelligence, brain-computer interfaces, nanotechnology, robotic prosthetics, and the possible development of life expansion, they're all fundamentally inegalitarian, based on the notion of limitlessness and standard level of physical and mental well-being will become to assume in healthcare. To be assumed by healthcare, it's not easy to conceive of a way of these potentialities can be enjoyed by all. Sociologist Saskia Sassen talks of the new logics of expulsion that capture the pathologies of today's global capitalism. He says that the expelled, for example, more than 60,000 migrants the last 20 years in fatal journeys, and the victims of the racially skewed profile of the increasing prison population. In Britain, for example, they include the social health cards and the many who perished in their towers just recently. Their deaths can be seen to have resulted from a systematic marginalization. Unprecedented acute concentration of wealth happens alongside these expulsions. Advanced economic and technical achievements enable this wealth and the expulsion surplus. At the same time, Sassen writes that they create a kind of nebulous centralness as the locus of power. End of quote. The oppressed have often risen against their masters, but today the oppressed have mostly been expelled and survived a great distance from their oppressors. The oppressor is increasingly a complex system that combines persons, networks, and machines with no obvious center. Unquote. Surplus populations will be moved from the productive aspects of the productive world will be put aside. Robotics potentially result in unemployment. Big wads of society will become unproductively and economically redundant. For historian Yuval Noah Harari, the most important question in the 21st century economics may well be, what should we do with all these superfluous people? Billions of people. We will be left with this scenario of a small elite that has almost total concentration of wealth, with access to the most powerful transformative technologies in world history, in a redundant mass of people, no longer suited to the evolutionary environment in which they find themselves, and entirely dependent of the benevolence of that elite. Wow. The dehumanizing treatment of today's spelled shows that prevailing liberal parties and developed countries don't always extend to those who don't share the same privilege, the same race, the same culture, or the same religion. In an ever radical technological power, the masses may even represent a significant security threat to the elite, which could be used to justify aggressive and authoritarian actions, perhaps enabling further cultural surveillance. In their transhumanist track, the proactionaries, Steve Fuller and Veronika Lipinska, argue that we are obliged to go scientific progress relentlessly until we achieve our godlike destiny of infinite power, effectively to serve God by becoming God. They unabashedly rebuild the incipient violence and destruction such Promethean aims will require. Replacing the natural with the artificial is so key to proactionary strategy, at least as a serious possibility, if not a livelihood, that it will lead to the long-term environments to the protection of the earth. Unquote. The extent of suffering they will be willing to gamble in this cosmic casino is only fully evident when analyzing what the project will mean for individuals, human beings, for the individual. And I quote them, "In proactionary world, we won't merely tolerate risk-taking, but outright encourage it, as people are provided with legal incentives to speculate with their bioeconomic assets. Living riskily will amount to an entrepreneurship of the self. Proactionaries seek large long-term benefits for survivors of a revolutionary regime that will permit many harms along the way." Unquote. Progress on overdrive will require sacrifices. The economic fragility that human race will be faced with as a result of automation and employment would likely produce proactionary goals in a society where vast swaths of people are reliant on the hand of the rich for survival. Large forces determine what social security means, and the people will risk more for a less reward. This will become a vehicle for fostering securitarized systems, while the proactionary state will operate like a venture capitalist writ large. Wow. At the heart of this Friends of the World's Wealth project is the removal of basic rights for humanity 1.0, Fuller's term for modern augmented human beings, replaced with duties toward the augmented ones. Hence, the very code of our being can and perhaps will be monetized. Personal autonomy should be seen as a politically licensed franchise, whereby individuals understand their bodies as akin to plots of land in what might be called genetic commons. The neoliberal preoccupation is so extended to human beings. Indeed, the reality for most citizens in developed, advanced capitalist nations takes that you are born into debt. Simply by being alive, you're invested with capital in which a return is expected. Just like that. Socially moribund masses may thus be forced to serve the techno-scientific super project of humanity 2.0, which is the ideology of market fundamentalism in its quest for perpetual production and maximum productivity and profit. The only significant difference is that the stated aim godlike capabilities in humanity 2.0 is overt as opposed to be undefined and determined by the infinite progress of an even more efficient market logic that we have now. Are politics required for these matters? Well, some transhumanists are beginning to understand that the most serious limitations to what human can achieve are social and cultural, not technical. However, all too often the reframing of politics came into the false technocentrical view. They commonly argue technopolitical poles are not left right but technoconservative or techno-progressive, and even techno-libertarian and techno-skeptic. Meanwhile, Fuller and Lipinska argue that no political poles will be up and down instead of left and right, those who want to dominate the skies and become all-powerful, and those who want to preserve the earth and its species' rich diversity. It is a false dichotomy, this one. Preservation of the latter is likely to be necessary for any hope for achieving the former. Transhumanism and advanced capitalism are two processes which rely on efficiency above everything else. The former is the means to power and the latter as a means to profit. Humans become vessels to serve these large minorities. Transhumans calls for politics with more clearly delineated and explicitly humane issues to provide, to foster nature of these kind of changes. Where do we stand in questions of social justice and environmental sustainability has never been more important. Technology doesn't allow us to escape these questions. It doesn't permit a political neutrality. On the contrary is true. It determines that our politics have never been more important. Savulescu is right when he says radical technologies are coming. He's wrong in thinking that they will fix our morality because they will reflect it.